world end takes place in a fantasy world, where humanity is on the verge of extinction after the invasion of monsters called beasts more than 500 years ago. However, other creatures such as demi-humans and fairy creatures still survived, and they chose to flee to islands floating in the sky to avoid the threat of the beasts that had ruled the lands of the earth. It was on the islands that they rebuilt cities, houses, and markets, while at the same time, they had to fend off the beasts who were still trying to invade their homes. And one of the figures chosen to fight the beasts is a blue-haired girl who is seen chasing a cat who stole her pendant at the beginning of the anime. But after a few moments of chasing, she lost her balance while crossing a bridge and fell. Luckily, a hooded man reacted quickly by catching the girl before she hit the ground. But the girl's hat fell off when she fell, making her face now clearly visible to the creatures around the scene. And it turns out that the furry creatures don't like those who are different from them, as can be seen from how they discriminate against the girl. But at this moment, the mysterious man, Willem Kumesh, takes off his hood and puts it on the girl before dragging her off to a shop to buy her a new hat. He also took her to where she wanted to go, the tallest tower in the city where one could see the whole city. But they could only enjoy the beautiful scenery for a moment because a few minutes later, several uniformed guards led by a lizard man came to pick her up. Later that night, Willem visits a pub, where he is offered a job by his friend, a goblin named Grick. The job requires Willem to go to a floating island, where later, he must become the keeper of the special arsenal used against the beasts. And although at first, he refuses because he doesn't want to be tied to military matters, in the end, he reluctantly agrees because Grick keeps pushing him if he wants to improve his miserable life. And so, Willem went to his destination, which was on an isolated island. But just as he gets there, a little girl greets him with a barrage of attacks. But of course, as an adult, Willem could dodge these attacks. He also saves the girl when she slips into the swamp, though it leaves him drenched in dirty water. At this moment, the blue-haired girl that Willem had met in the city appeared from across the bridge, and seeing him lying in the swamp, she immediately took him to her place. There he cleaned himself up before a servant named Neglotho gave him a tour of the place, which turned out to be none other than the armory he had to guard. Neglotho herself had known Willem before, and he knew he had to be careful around her. It was because she was a troll eager to taste his body. After looking around the place, Willem entered his room to take a rest. But apparently, the circumstances had not allowed him to rest because he still had to deal with the children who were curious about the new guard. They were Lakish, Colin, Ponyball, and Tiet. The 4 children immediately bombarded Willem with questions about him, and he answered all of them patiently. Unexpectedly, his answers made them even more attracted to him. But the question and answer session had to end early when a blue-haired girl appeared at the door and told the 4 children to go to bed. After they left, the blue-haired girl finally introduced herself. Her name was Kuthali, and she was the eldest of all the girls except Neglotho. With the 2 of them together, Willem took this opportunity to ask Kuthali because he was still confused about his new job, especially since this place looked more like an orphanage than an armory. Moreover, he hadn't seen a single weapon when he explored the place a bit, so what should he take care of? This is where Kuthali finally reveals that she and the girls are the weapons that he asked about, and that meant Willem had to look after them. The next day, Willem formally introduced himself to all the children at breakfast. But he was surprised when he found that there were so many children in that place. All of them were girls, and in his eyes, they looked like ordinary children. And what surprised Willem even more was that the children always avoided him after introducing himself, as if they were afraid of him. That's why, when Neglotho was drying clothes, Willem told her his concern, and she tried to calm him down, saying the kids were just not used to the presence of men. But Willem did not want to let the situation continue like that for long. Therefore, he tried to win over the children. First, he befriended 2 children the same age as Kuthali, namely Athia and Nephron, and with their help, he then cooked sweets and puddings for all the children. Willem's tactics worked very well. The children really enjoyed his food and even asked for an extra portion. So, since then, the children have become very close to him, although he doesn't seem like a very good nanny. One day, while Willem was watching the kids play dodgeball, one of them fell off a cliff while chasing the ball. But strangely, even though the girl's head was badly injured and bleeding, she didn't feel any pain, and the other girls acted as if she was fine. Sensing something odd about the girls, Willem went to Neglotho in the evening and demanded an explanation from her. She then took him underground to a room where the legendary Dug weapons were stored to answer his question. So, over 500 years ago, humans created 17 beasts that, ironically, ended up almost wiping out humanity. And Dug weapons are said to be the only type of weapon that can be used to kill the 17 beasts, but only selected humans can use them. And now, when humanity is on the verge of extinction, it's the leprechauns who use them. Leprechauns were elves who had imitated human behavior since ancient times, and that was why only they could use dug weapons at this time. And the girls, whom Willem had to take care of, were none other than leprechauns, the creatures who knew no fear of death. Coincidentally, a few days later, Athia and Kuthali were sent to the battlefield to fight a beast. Now that Willem knew the truth, he decided to fetch them when they returned home from fighting. And seeing their bodies covered in wounds made him even more determined to be the girls' caretaker. After arriving home, Willem treated Kuthali's wounds, and she informed him that within the next 5 days, one of the islands would be attacked by a beast called a Timere. Beasts generally can't fly, but Timere differs from other beasts. It can release parts of its body to reach the Sky Islands. That's why it must be stopped. But the thing is, it can only be stopped if the girls commit suicide attacks, and Kuthali is one of the girls who will do that. So, before she died, she wanted to make one last request to Willem. She wanted him to kiss her. As a responsible adult, Willem told her it was wrong and rejected her unreasonable request. Although, in the end, he kissed her on the forehead. After making sure Kuthali is asleep, Willem asks Nefren's help to search the documents. He was looking for a way, so Kuthali doesn't have to blow herself up in the upcoming battle against Timere. After staying up all night, they had managed to find a way to escape death. But when they told Kuthali in the morning, she had refused and told them that she was destined to die in battle. So to show her that he was right, Willem takes Kuthali outside and invites her to do a sparring duel using dug weapons. Apparently, Willem can use the weapon much better than Kuthali, allowing him to defeat her easily. Indeed, the leprechauns still couldn't fully master the dug weapons, and their fighting techniques were still bad. Willem is aware of these things, so he intends to teach Kuthali to fight so that she can defeat the enemy without sacrificing herself. But his offer only made her angry because she felt it would make the sacrifices of the leprechauns in vain. And suddenly, Willem fell unconscious. When he fainted, Willem dreamed about his past, where he turned out to be a hero who managed to defeat a powerful beast more than 500 years ago. But at the same time as the monster's defeat, Willem was hit by a curse that made him petrified, and he continued to be in that state for the next 500 years. Back to the present time, Niglotho seems to be discussing how to anticipate the Timere attack with a military official. But no matter how much they discussed, in the end, they found no other way but to send one of the leprechauns to blow themselves up. That, of course, saddened Niglotho to the point where she burst into tears. But her cries were interrupted by Ponyball, who came to tell her that Willem had fainted. Luckily, Niglotho was good at taking care of people, so soon, Willem woke up. But the bad news is that she diagnosed his body had been damaged because of the battle against the beast 500 years ago. Apparently, the sparring duel with Kuthali made his old wounds resurface. Later that night, Niglotho finally told the children who Willem really was. So back then, she had worked as a salvager, and then she and her friends happened to find Willem petrified inside the ice, and they decided to resurrect him. After he regained consciousness, they discovered that Willem was the only human who survived the beast invasion 500 years ago. In other words, he was the last human in the world. Therefore, now Niglotho asked the girls not to fear or hate Willem. He had gone through many things and deserved sympathy. But beyond Niglotho's expectations, the girls become more curious about Willem. Everyone except Kuthali was still confused about what they should do. And so, to get rid of her anxiety, she flew through the night sky and then accidentally met the lizard men, whose name was Limeskin. He finally realizes the cause of her anxiety, so he tries to calm her down, saying that Willem just wants to make her stronger. Even so, she still had to do what her heart told her to do. Taking advice from Limeskin, Kuthali returns to the island, and it turns out that Willem is waiting for her near the cliff while doing maintenance on her dug weapon. At this moment, she chose to accompany him, and it seemed that she had already decided what she should do, and she decided to accept Willem's offer to learn to fight properly. Her decision certainly pleased Willem, but to motivate her more so that she returns safely from her mission, he promises to grant her one wish upon her return. And here, she just asked him to make her a butter cake. A few days passed, the girls escorted the departure of Kuthali, Nefren, and Athia to fight the Timere beast, and since then, Willem has continued his work of looking after the girls. However, a few days after Kuthali and the others left, he began having nightmares about the 3 girls' deaths. And Niglotho also appeared in his dream, informing him that all the remaining girls had been sent into battle. But then again, luckily, it was just a dream. The battle Kuthali and her 2 friends were in are not shown. Instead, the story now focuses more on Willem and one of the girls, Tiet, who has just had a special dream. Leprechaun girls will indeed have this special dream, and because of that, they should be examined immediately. That's why now Willem took Tia to Corne de Lux. It was an island where animal-like and human-like creatures lived in peace. They go to that place to check Tia's body at the hospital. Incidentally, Corne de Lux is a tourist island and also a filming location for romantic films. Because of that, Willem took her around and had an excursion to places that had been filming locations. But when they saw the monument to the statue of the city's founder, that man seemed familiar to them for some reason. After finishing sightseeing, Willem took Tia to the hospital. But he, still wondering what the meaning of Tia's dream was, then spoke to the head doctor while she was being examined to inquire about the purpose of the examination. According to the doctor, it turns out that not all leprechauns have the potential to use dug weapons. Only those who have a special dream have potential. The purpose of the examination is to collect data on the girls to determine how they can bring out their potential to the fullest. And Tia was thrilled to know she had potential, so did Willem. Although, that was not what he truly wanted because, deep down, he was troubled at the thought of her being sent to the battlefield at such a young age. The day turned to night, and since the examination on Tia would be done tomorrow, Willem had to stay overnight at a military facility. Here, Willem received news from one of the officers regarding the failure of the battle that Kuthali and her friends had fought. The news made Willem shock. His knees suddenly went limp, and he fell in the pouring rain. But suddenly, the three girls appeared with limeskin. Seeing Kuthali in good condition, Willem immediately ran to hug her tightly. Everyone was surprised. Kuthali was embarrassed to be treated like that in front of many people, making her slap him. After everyone calmed down, Athia finally explained the battle to Willem. So, about 18 hours ago, the battle against Timere was initially going well for the girls. But suddenly, Timere evolves into a new form, forcing Limeskin to tell everyone to retreat. But Kuthali didn't listen to the order. Instead, she flew toward the monster to launch an attack, intent on blowing herself up. But before she could launch an attack, a strange vision suddenly flashed through her mind, making her eyes turn red for a moment. Mysteriously, her intention to commit suicide vanished instantly, replaced by a desire to stay alive, and so she chose to leave the island with the others. Although, right now, she regretted failing the suicide attack and even blamed herself for it, but thankfully, she has good comrades. They didn't blame her for her decision but tried to comfort her. However, their conversation is then interrupted by the arrival of Fear, the daughter of the mayor, who comes to ask for Limeskin's help in preventing a supremacist group from killing her father. Her father supported the integration of all races, which is why the supremacists were looking for him. As a proof, Fear shows Limeskin a death threat letter against her father. But unfortunately, Limeskin couldn't fulfill her request, and neither could Willem. Although sympathetic to her and her father, military rule forbade them to interfere in local matters. But Fear certainly did not give up so easily. She kept persuading Willem to help and even followed along as they picked Tia up at the hospital. Not only that, she was even willing to spend a lot of money to treat Willem and the others to one of the best cafes in town. It cheered everyone up, except for Kuthali, who was still tired from the last battle, and her anxiety still carried over while they all visited tourist spots. Then at some point, as the street entertainers passed by them, she again had the strange vision, the same as the one she had on the battlefield. But for some reason, she decided not to tell the others. With that, they continued their sightseeing tour, and as if she had forgotten her original destination, Fear began to act like a tour guide. Even so, Willem realizes that they are being followed by the supremacists, so he asks Fear to take them to a quiet place to lure the group out. The supremacists, who called themselves the Annihilation Knights, fell for the trap. They all show themselves and reveal that their aim is to kidnap Fear. But how unlucky they were. Even if they were superior in numbers, they were still no match for Willem. He was able to defeat them using only coins and a little magic. And at the same time, the city security came after hearing the fuss and immediately arrested them. Fear thanks Willem for defeating the supremacists, though she is not happy that he used her as bait, and because of that, she no longer continued her role as a tour guide and left. Long story short, Willem and the others continued their tour, and it was only at dusk that they headed for the harbor to head home. But as they walked, Kuthali realized something important, so she stopped walking and looked at him with a serious expression, saying that she knew Willem actually wanted to fight too to fulfill his suicidal desire. Although he is surprised at her sudden words, he admits that what she said is true because he has no one else in this world. But that was in the past before he met Kuthali and the other girls. Now, he had considered them like family, so he didn't want to lose them. Hearing Willem's honesty seemed to give Kuthali the courage to tell the truth, and so she told him directly that she was in love with him.
恋してますから。
Willem did not immediately respond to the confession and instead continued his way to the harbor. But when he got there, an unknown officer approached him and asked him to meet someone. Here Willem chose not to go with strangers, so he refused to follow the officer. But he immediately changed his mind when the officer mentioned Suwung Kondel's name, so Willem asked the girls to go home without him while he went alone to Suwung's. Unexpectedly, it turns out that Suwung is the founder of the city, the same as Willem's former comrade in the past. Indeed, it made no sense that he was still alive today, 500 years after the invasion of the beasts. In fact, he had already died during the battle, but before he died, he deliberately cursed himself and thus changed his life. With that curse, neither wound nor time could kill him, thus making him no longer human. Now he is just an immortal being with an old man look. But this immortal old man didn't summon Willem just to reminisce about the past. He wanted Willem to meet someone or more like a creature. The scene switches to when Kuthali and the other leprechauns have arrived home. It seems that even now, she is still haunted by this strange vision, which seems more like a memory of a young girl. Even during her battle with Timere, the memory kept bothering her. But only Kuthali could hear that, while Athia and Nephrin heard nothing at all. The memory clearly made it difficult for her to concentrate. But because of feeling motivated by Willem's promise to make her a butter cake, she continued to attack alone until she finally managed to defeat the beast. Back to Willem, it turns out that Suwung took him somewhere to meet a giant skull. But it wasn't just a random skull. It was Ebonkandel, who was none other than the beast Willem defeated in his last battle, as well as the one responsible for making him petrified in the ice. But now, Ebonkandel has teamed up with Suwung, and thanks to the core of the Ebonkandel, he was even able to create floating islands about 500 years ago to protect the surviving species from the beasts that rule the Earth's surface. But Suwung had no intention of letting things continue like that. Now that Suwung had found Willem, he asked him to cooperate with him in reclaiming the land from the beast's hands. With Willem's ability to tune dug weapons and the leprechauns, who could reproduce as many times as needed, he was confident they could achieve that goal. But Suwung's words took Willem by surprise. It turned out that Suwung had been the one who had created the leprechauns. Finding no way to argue, Suwung finally admits that he created the leprechauns using the souls of dead children. But unlike ordinary humans, the leprechauns would not live long. Moreover, if they fought too much, the memories of their soul owners would return and corrupt their minds before eventually taking over their minds. Suwung's explanation was enough to make Willem refuse his offer to join his plan. But when he vents his anger on Suwung, the bespectacled rabbit reappears and reports that Kuthali's personality is starting to break down. Hearing that, Willem rushes back to the warehouse. Then he sees Kuthali lying helplessly on her bed. But actually, she is now in her subconscious, where she meets a red-haired girl named Elk, who invites her to play together. But she decides to return, as she remembers she still has an unfulfilled promise with Willem. And so, Kuthali came back to her senses, just as Willem and Niglato were talking about her. How happy they were when they saw her open her eyes again, especially Willem, who immediately embraced her with great emotion. This is the second time he has hugged her. Only this time, she didn't slap him, but instead, she burst into tears. A few days later, when Kuthali woke up in the morning, she noticed a change in herself. A few strands of her blue hair had turned red. Therefore Niglato brought her to undergo an examination, and to her surprise, based on the results of the examination and blood tests, Niglato found that her body was no longer the body of a fairy or leprechaun. The news surprised her, but Niglato calmly asked her not to think about it too much. The only consequence was that she couldn't use dug weapons for a while. Meanwhile, Willem is back to his usual activities, taking care of the girls. But he still didn't forget his promise to Kuthali, so he made some butter cakes. But it was not only for Kuthali to enjoy it but all the girls too. After everything was ready, he then served the cakes to the girls, and she was very touched after tasting them, considering that her struggle to return from the battlefield was only to eat the cake. Then, the scene switches to a cruiser boarded by two leprechauns, Naft and Rontalk, who are assigned to escort the salvagers during their expedition to the surface. And one of the salvagers they had to escort was Grick, who immediately tried to familiarize himself with the two girls as soon as he met them. After a while in the air, they finally arrived at their destination. Although not long after they reached the ground, a large beast that was immune to bullets immediately attacked them. Fortunately, the salvagers came with the guards, and this is where Naft shows her skills in fighting. She managed to kill the beast with just a few slashes of her dug weapon. However, before it died, the monster caused some damage and injured several salvager personnel. so they had to wait for help to arrive while surviving in that place. After that, the military summoned Willem to their base and then ordered him to send one of the leprechauns from the warehouse to help the salvagers. The military commander even threatened that the chosen leprechaun had to carry out her duties even if it meant she had to sacrifice her life. Willem was not pleased with the order to send his foster children to the grave, but when he found out that the excavation site was in his hometown and the salvagers had found a new dug weapon, lapidemsibilus, he immediately changed his mind. Not only would he send a leprechaun there, but he would come. That's because lapidemsibilus is a weapon that can improve the user's mentality. Willem realized he had to get the weapon and then use it to heal Kuthali. But when Willem told Kuthali that he and Nefren were going to get the dug weapon, she decided to go with them. After all, she couldn't let them go to a dangerous place for her sake while she was comfortable sleeping at home. Seeing her determination, Willem finally agreed to let her go with him, and the commander didn't mind it either. Later that night, Willem, Kuthali, and the girls in the warehouse enjoy the beautiful view of the shooting stars, and this is when he begins to show his love for Kuthali. But the happy moment between them didn't last long, because then one of the girls climbed a pole on the roof of the building and fell. Kuthali let out her wings on reflex and flew off to save the girl. Kuthali manages to save her, but Willem ends up nagging her. She shouldn't act rashly by bringing out her abilities like that because she no longer has the body of a fairy. He was afraid that something bad would happen if she kept pushing herself like that. And her fear became a reality because moments later when Kuthali had just finished taking a shower, the red color in her hair grew even more. So, to calm herself down, she sat on the cliff, looking at the night sky. Now she wasn't sure if she could hold on because the more her hair turned red, the more her memory faded. At first, the symptoms may seem trivial, such as when she forgets where to put something. But as time went on, her memory got worse, to the point where she forgot the other girls' names. While she was worrying about all this while sitting alone on the cliff, Athia came over to her to comfort her. Turns out Athia had a similar problem with her. A long time ago, she was troubled by the memory from her previous life. But because she diligently made notes in her diary before her memory completely disappeared, a new awareness that took over her mind could recognize her personality. Since then, she has acted as if she was Athia. So in other words, the real Athia had actually disappeared for some time, and the other girls weren't aware of it. Kuthali thought the diary was a good idea, and she planned to start writing notes about herself. So when Kuthali woke up the next morning, she decided she would enjoy the rest of her short life with optimism. In particular, she wanted to make as many memories as possible with the other girls, and so she started spending more time with the other girls, cooking for them and knitting shawls when winter came. Kuthali's sudden change did not go unnoticed by Willem, who already knew that her memory was gradually fading away. But he remained optimistic, believing that the sword of lapidemsibilus could definitely heal her. For now, he could only wait for the commander to speed up the preparations for his departure. A few days later, the day of departure finally arrived, and on this special day, all the warehouse occupants gathered to let Willem, Kuthali, and Nefren go. Shortly after arriving at the surface, Willem and the others ran into Rontalk and Noft. But for some reason, Rontalk doesn't seem to believe Willem, who she knows is the only survivor of the tragedy 500 years ago. Moreover, it was humans who created beasts as a result of biological weapons experiments. Regardless, Willem and Nefren started moving in search of their coveted dug weapon. They visit the mine. They find Grick in the middle of a heated argument with the commander, who he judges have sent too many people there. Because, as far as Grick knew, the teams that consisted of 7 people never came back alive. But the commander disagreed with him, calling what he said a myth. He persisted in sending many people into the mines. Fortunately, during their debate, Willem finally managed to get information about where the salvagers kept the excavations. So without further ado, he went to the warehouse to look for the dug weapon. But before he had time to start, suddenly an earthquake occurred, and at the same time, a strange memory came flooding back into Kuthali's mind. And then, Kuthali is back in her subconscious, where Elk shows her an incident from the past when a red-haired hero named Lilia came to her. But back then, Lilia didn't come with a peaceful purpose but to finish off Elk. When Kuthali regained consciousness, she was in the room, with Nefren fast asleep beside her. Then she got out of bed and went through the day as if nothing had happened to her. She helped clean the plane with the rest of the crew, cook for the scavengers, and sew their clothes. Seeing how Kuthali seemed so friendly and eager to work, Rontalk became curious about her. And so she asked what her purpose in coming to the Earth's surface was. Was it for the sake of that Willem guy? Here, Kuthali tells everything about how she has problems with her memory and how Willem intends to cure her. Hearing Kuthali's explanation, Rontalk's gaze at Willem changed slightly. She and Noft were even willing to help him find Lapid Mcbilu's sword. After some time, while Willem was helping with maintaining Noft's sword, Kuthali came for him. And she came at the right time because Willem finally found Lapid Mcbilus a while ago. However, in the middle of the maintenance process, Willem found something odd about Noft's sword. It turned out that her weapon was not damaged when in fact, the sword was made to be used to kill humans, not beasts. So how could the sword still be in such good condition after Noft used it to kill the beasts? And more importantly, how did she kill beasts with a sword meant to kill humans? After thinking for a while, Willem was reminded of Rontalk's words. Previously she had expressed her assumptions about the beasts to him. All this time, Rontalk had always wondered how humans created creatures like beasts. She guessed there must be a creature that served as the beast's core. And now, Willem finally had his answer. Based on the characteristics of Noft's sword, he guessed that the beast's core was none other than the humans themselves. So all this time, the monsters they fought and killed were humans. This revelation shocked Willem, causing his knees to go weak and the sword he was holding to fall. Seeing him suddenly acting like that made Kuthali worried, so she went over and asked him to explain what had shocked him. Then, something unexpected happened. Willem hugs Kuthali and proposes to her to marry him. Now it was Kuthali's turn to be surprised, but her surprise didn't last long. After confirming that she wasn't dreaming, she gladly accepted his proposal. The next day, when Kuthali woke up from her sleep, the moment Willem proposed to her was still in her mind, making her blush. Her nervousness carried over even as she walked alone with him. Inevitably, it made the situation between them a little awkward. Fortunately, during that situation, they met Grick, who then took them around until they arrived in front of Willem's old house. Seeing the scene before him made Willem reminisce about his past, making him a little sad. But this moment, Kuthali's illness hit her again, and she felt as if something was calling her. Then, moments later, a huge earthquake occurred, causing the ground around the mine site to collapse, including the ground that Willem and the others were stepping on. What's worse is the beasts also appeared as the earthquake stopped. Luckily, Nefren was still able to handle the monsters, and the commander reacted quickly by ordering everyone to get ready to leave. Meanwhile, Willem, Kuthali, and Grick are now underground, and thankfully they're all right. Although, Kuthali looked like she was in a semi-conscious state. Knowing they couldn't stay there for long, the three of them started walking to get out of there. But instead of a way out, they find the bodies of the mine diggers. And it was at this moment, Kuthali was acting strangely as if she was in a trance. Without heeding Willem and Grick's calls, she flew deeper underground until she finally arrived at a mysterious ruin containing some crystal. Miraculously, as soon as she touched the crystal, her hair turned red drastically. But no wonder the crystal has a miraculous effect because in it lies the body of Elk, who was killed by Lilia. However, they couldn't stay any longer to analyze the crystal because moments later, the dungeon started shaking violently like it was about to collapse. And so, they ran towards the path they assumed was the way out, with Willem carrying Kuthali on his back. They made it out of the underground and returned safely to the plain, although Kuthali was still unconscious. When she fainted, she was in her subconscious where she met Elk. This time Elk tells her a story from the past, and here's the story. A long time ago, the gods realized that humans had the intention to destroy the world, so they sent Pote-au, or the three guardian gods of the world, to prevent the world's destruction. But ironically, they failed miserably as they were lost at the hands of heroes from among humans. After that, as is well known, some of the humans turned into monsters or beasts, annihilating the remaining humans. After telling the story of the past, Elk then reveals one other thing that is no less important, the owner of the soul of Kuthali. It turns out that Kuthali was created from Elk's soul, and that's why she always gets visions of her past. While Kuthali received a mountain of exposition from Elk, the situation in the real world was in chaos. Beasts keep coming non-stop, making the salvager threatened. Rontalk and Nulf kept trying their best to fight and hold back the monsters, but after a while, they became overwhelmed. Likewise, with Nefren, who was in charge of guarding the plane's interior. She was already getting tired because the beasts kept coming in. But even though her body has reached its limit, she still tries to do her duty. On the other hand, Willem still faithfully accompanies Kuthali, feeling guilty for not being able to fulfill his promise to her. A beast presumptuously entered the room, and the beast became the target of Willem's anger. He didn't care anymore that his body wasn't fit to fight. He kept forcing himself to beat the beast until finally, he managed to throw it out of the plane. After that, he moved to the top of the plane, where he saw a beast about to eat Rontalk. Willem was able to save her and kick the beast down from the plane. But his body couldn't take it anymore. With blood dripping from his body, he staggered away from Rontalk before finally collapsing. Moments later, Willem woke up in Rontalk's lap. Inevitably, the girl wondered why a human like him could defeat beasts so easily without a weapon, and she immediately asked him about it. He briefly told her about his past as a hero before leaving her to return to continue the fight. It turned out that his struggle was witnessed by Kuthali from her subconscious, and she couldn't bear to see Willem suffer anymore. Therefore, she asked Elk so that she could return to her body just one more time, even though she knew if she did that, her consciousness would disappear completely. But in fact, the hope of winning is dwindling. The beasts have now managed to damage the plane's engines, forcing the commander to order the crew to remove all cargo to maintain altitude. Nefren could not move after the fight drained her strength, and her decision made her fall out of the plane. Willem, who happened to see Nefren fall, quickly tried to help her by holding her hand. But he too was weak now, and on top of that, the blood on their hands made their grip slippery. Shortly after, her hand slipped, and she fell from the plane. However, Willem did not want to see his loved ones die again, and so he boldly jumped down to save Nefren. At the same time, Kuthali finally woke up with her last consciousness. She walked past Naft, who was lying helpless, picked up her sword, and then prepared to jump off the plane. Naft was trying desperately to prevent her, but Kuthali didn't listen to that and jumped down. Luckily, she managed to catch Willem and Nefren just before they hit the ground. But when she looked around, as far as the eye could see, they were completely surrounded by the beast. Realizing there was no other way out of the situation, Kuthali used her remaining strength to fight all the monsters. No matter how many beasts in front of them or how badly injured she was, she continued to swing her sword as Willem watched her from a distance. And then, when there was no hope left, she blew herself up.
Willem, arigatou.
At the end of the anime, we are shown that Kuthali and Nefren have died in battle. Naft and Rontalk managed to survive even though their bodies were covered in wounds. So, what about Willem? His whereabouts were unknown, and not even Suwon could find him. But he knew that Willem was still alive. This is really a depressing anime. But still, the moral of the story is to keep fighting until it is no longer possible for us to continue the struggle. Also, we can learn about the meaning of family from this anime, and how important it is to protect them.